So the four gentlemen you're looking at on these pictures, so they're commonly known in the boxing industry, if you like, as the cartel. Now, I don't mean, Pablo Escobar's men. That sounds kind of sinister, doesn't it? And kind of seedy. But these four guys were known as the cartel. And basically they had the monopoly on British boxing for decades. I mean, absolute decades, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. Mickey Duff kind of went into, officially retired at 99. So who were the cartel? So, of course, you've got Mickey Duff, a.k.a. Monica Prager. So he was the real heartbeat behind the cartel. He was the energy. He was very influential in the boxing world. He had a lot of energy. He woke up and, just literally from the minute he woke up to the minute he went to bed, he was just all about making money. And, certainly, as I said, all four of them were, I said it in a previous video. So all four of them they were like a cog that, a finely tuned machine, if you like. And they were formidable, absolutely and utterly formidable. Mickey Duff's knowledge, his boxing general, just IQ was second to anyone that's ever been on the planet. That's not my words as well. That's what Barry McGuigan said to me quite recently. And Mickey Duff, probably the most well-known. He kind of, I suppose, was the poster boy, if you like. So Mike Barrett, he was a Scottish guy who probably out of the four is the least well-known. So he was a boxing promoter, and he was in charge of the Royal Albert Hall. And, there was he had his own fighters away from Mickey Duff as well, Gary Jacobs being one. They obviously kind of worked together because it just made sense. That's one of the things you kind of have to greatly admire about Frank Warren. So when bearing in mind these guys had a vice-like grip over British boxing for decades, Frank Warren kind of come in off the back of his unlicensed promotion shows, 78, 79. Obviously, he was Lenny McLean's second cousin. And, it must have just been impossible. They had, as I said, Mike Barrett had the Royal Albert Hall. Mickey Duff was everywhere. And Jarvis Astaire. So Jarvis Astaire, if you like, was the big wig. John Spencer told me he was the financial backing. And not only did he kind of obviously money roll a lot of the shows, he had Wembley. He was in charge of Wembley. So John told, God rest him, John Spenceley, I'm doing the Mickey Duff book at the minute, and he was telling me how it worked, and whereas Roger Levitt financed John Spenceley's shows, so Mickey Duff had Jarvis Astaire. So he was a fellow Jew himself, and a lot of people, Jarvis Astaire, what Jarvis Astaire did in boxing was only probably about 10% of what he did just as a whole. At one point he managed Dustin Hoffman. The guy who had, he was, let's not forget as well, Jarvis Astaire was inducted in the Boxing Hall of Fame, the World Hall of Fame over Minnesota in 2006. So, that is a guy of serious, if you could imagine boxing was only 10% of what he was up to. And, he actually turned down the chance to manage the Beatles purely down to his wife didn't like the music. And, he only died 3 years ago. He was 97. I would have loved to have met him, spoke to him. And the other guy of the fourth and final member of the cartel is Terry Lawless. Arguably Britain's, I was going to say greatest trainer. Maybe that's not true, because obviously what I will say is probably Britain's most successful trainer, manager. And it's quite astounding, really, considering the guy never picked up a pair of boxing gloves in his life. He had so many top fighters coming through his, obviously some of the pictures in his video of him and Frank Bruno, but John L. Gardner told me what Terry was like training, and, he was in charge of, like, your Charlie Magrees and, if I sat and thought about it, so his gym was in Canning Town, which is, it's not in the East End. It's classed as East London, which is not really in East End. Canning Town in itself is one hell of a rough place. So he had a gym called the Royal Oak. I believe I don't know, it's been flattened now. I think it's flats or something anyway. And Jim Watt said to me, he said, whereas Mickey Duff was a businessman, he was all about money and, the financial aspect of it. Terry Lawless was like your dad. He looked at his boxers like they were his sons, and he really looked after his fighters when they were on the way up, and he didn't really like taking risks for his fighters unless they got to that level where you just it was impossible to you kind of well title levels. And the four of them were very astute, and God help anyone who tried to come into the game, as Frank Warren did, and of course Barry Hearn did, and these days boxing for me is it's kind of run by blokes in suits from Essex and Kent, and they're not really boxing people. Whereas your Terry Lawless, your Mickey Duffs, even your Mike Barretts, and even people outside the cartel, names that spring to my mind, your Tommy Millers, your Ernie Fossies, your Denny Mancini's, your Brendan Ingalls, obviously a little bit further back, your Nat Bassos, your Jack Solomons, your Harry Levines, George Francis. These were people, never mind none of this MMA stuff. I mean, Mickey Duff's in his book, he said, I can't switch off from matchmaking. He said, I'm in the bath, I'm doing tea, and I'm thinking of fighters and weight and that's what, it was a way of life. And I think that's why probably boxing, British boxing as a whole, was really at its pinnacle, probably, mid-70s, late 70s to maybe the early 80s. That was a time when, it was, these days, yes, there's so many belts, and I suppose now we have more world champions more than ever. But back in that time, you're 40, 45 years ago, there was one belt. These days you can win belts playing snakes and ladders. They're everywhere. And, Mickey Duff always had a thing for the WBC. Henry Wharton would often say to him, can you get me a WBO shot or an IBF shot? And he said, behave, I'll buy you one of them. It was all about the WBC, so, and I think that's why boxing in the 70s and the early 80s was far more healthier. And because those guys were in the game, and they did, Mickey Duff had the BBC contract for 33 years. Loyalty, if you want loyalty to buy a dog, that was one of his probably most iconic sayings. But he was very loyal, and he was loyal to the BBC, even when he could have jumped ship to Sky Sports in the early 90s, and he declined. And he stuck with BBC. And they're kind of been boxing I'm just trying to think, maybe the early 90s. And then, of course, ITV started doing the Big Fight Live, and that pretty much, I suppose, the writing on the wall was kind of around, so when Bruno Bugner, I think it was Barry Hearn put that on at White Hart Lane in 87, and Frank Maloney was coming through, and he put Nigel Ben Michael Watson on at Finsbury Park in 89, and Duff, obviously Michael Watson was a Duff fighter then, and as I said, Bruno for Joe Bugner 87. That was a Mickey Duff fighter, and so the cartel were kind of fading away, if you like. And age caught with them. It is a young man's game. As I said, Mickey Duff officially retired 99. He had one foot out the door, probably from about 94, 95-ish. Billy Swear was his very last fighter. Henry Wharton had his very last world title fight in 98 against Robin Reed. But I personally know, because obviously I'm doing the Mickey Duff book, and a lot of the fighters were given the contracts back in the 90s. It was a hobby then for Mickey Duff, and the cartel, I would have loved to have met them. Each character kind of complemented the other, and although some of them didn't get on, Mickey Duff and Terry Lawless would have screaming matches. Duke McKenzie said to me, and he said, and then when he put the phone down, he'd just look at Duke and go, Duke, it's just business. But, it was widely known that Terry Lawless didn't quite get on with Mike Barrett. And Mike Barrett kind of got disillusioned with the sport, particularly when there was a lot of governing bodies coming in, and which he didn't particularly agree with. But, that's just a little rundown on the cartel, aka Mickey Duff, aka Monique Prager, and then of course you've got Terry Lawless and Mike Barrett and Jarvis Astaire, all sadly no longer here. I'm just trying to think. So obviously Jarvis Astaire died 3 years ago. Mike Barrett probably was the first one 10 years ago. Of course, Mickey Duff, 2014, and then I think Terry Lawless would have been the first one to go in 2009. Gallbladder cancer. He was living abroad. But I personally think boxing is a far less colourful place, and I think it's a lot. I don't think it is what it is. A lot of the things there, I'm talking about, I wasn't even born, but these are the things that I really love to study, and I've got a pile of boxing newses now, and from the 70s and the 80s, and I'm opening, and literally every page is some kind of cartel, some kind of input, whether it's one of the fights or promotions or, they were just that influential, can I say? As I said, if your face didn't fit with them, particularly as a London boxer, it would have been near enough impossible to work. And as I said, there was a lot of other promoters around Britain. Your John Spenceley's up north. Ron Gray was about the West Midlands. Of course, you had Alex Morrison in Scotland, and Tommy Gilmore, those were the guys, and they were the main faces, if you like. So let us know in the comments below, what are your thoughts, what's your opinions, did you meet any of them? As I said, I would have absolutely loved to have met any of them guys. I would have been starstruck, absolutely. What them guys achieved in boxing is, particularly Mickey Duff, there will never be another Mickey Duff. That's what Duke McKenzie said to me. Completed boxing in every aspect. He was a boxer, he was a promoter, a manager, he worked as a trainer, a cutsman, he just did it all, and his knowledge was second to none to anyone I've ever, as I said, and that's not my opinion, this is like Barry McGuigan's told me, Jim Watts told me, even Frank Warren. Frank Warren said the biggest influence British boxing's ever had, certainly post-war. And it's fair to say that Mickey Duff kind of had, what Frank Warren done to him, he did to your Harry Levines and certainly your Jack Solomons. He just passed the baton on. And boxing's a young sport. It's need to be vibrant. You need to have a lot of energy. And that was one of the things Mickey Duff said. He said, he said, because I'm around people, young people so much, you have to think like a young person. And I think that's probably why he dyed his hair a little bit as well. But, yeah, let us know your thoughts. The Cartel. What a gang. What a posse. And, British boxing has a lot to thank those guys for. Complete and utter pioneers of today's boxing.